I'm sorry.
Take off your ugly shirt and wipe the floor.
I arrived from headquarters, but no one knew it. The first person I met was a janitor. I stumbled slightly and spilled some of my coffee, and then he said something that shocked me. "Take off your ugly shirt and wipe the floor." He didn't know who I was yet. And now, in order. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Not the comfortable kind that settles over an office early in the morning before keyboards wake up and phones begin to vibrate. This silence was sharp, sudden, unnatural, like the moment right before something breaks. I was standing near the long corridor that led to the conference rooms, holding a paper cup of coffee that was already too full. I remember thinking, absurdly, that I should have taken the lid. I remember the faint smell of burnt espresso and cheap sugar. I remember adjusting the strap of my bag on my shoulder. And then, the cup slipped. It wasn't dramatic. No slow motion. No heroic attempt to save it. My fingers simply loosened and gravity did the rest. The coffee splashed across the polished office floor, spreading in an uneven brown stain that reflected the ceiling lights like a broken mirror. The sound was small, a dull splash, but it echoed. Conversation stopped. Chairs stopped rolling. Someone coughed and then went quiet. I felt every pair of eyes turn toward me, though no one openly stared for more than a second. The air shifted, as if the office itself had taken a step back. "I'm sorry," I said automatically, already crouching down, already reaching into my bag for tissues that I knew wouldn't be enough. That was when she appeared. She moved fast, almost eagerly, as if she'd been waiting for something like this to happen. She couldn't have been older than 22, maybe 23. Blonde hair pulled into a tight ponytail, bright sneakers that squeaked slightly against the floor. A badge hung from her neck, swinging as she walked. "Ashley, cleaning intern." She looked at the spill. Then she looked at me. Her lips twisted into something between a smile and a grimace. "What did you do?" she snapped, loud enough for people 2 desks away to hear. I blinked, surprised more by the tone than the words. I spilled my coffee. I'll clean it up." She laughed. Not kindly, not nervously. It was sharp, satisfied. "Of course you did." She crossed her arms and tilted her head, inspecting me like an inconvenience. "You people are always making messes." I stood there, tissues useless in my hand, feeling heat rise to my face. Around us, monitors glowed. Someone shuffled papers. Someone else suddenly became very interested in their phone. "I'll get more napkins," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Ashley shook her head. "No. You'll do it properly." She leaned closer, lowering her voice just enough to make it feel intimate, but not enough to hide it. "Take off that ugly shirt," she said, "and wipe the floor yourself." For a moment, I wasn't sure I'd heard her correctly. "I'm sorry?" I asked. She straightened, louder now, confident, enjoying this. "Your shirt. Take it off. It's already ugly, so you might as well use it. Or do you think someone else is going to clean your mess?" My heart started to pound, slow and heavy, like a warning drum. I looked around. People were watching, carefully, from the corners of their eyes, from behind screens, from reflections in glass walls. No one stepped forward. No one spoke. No one even frowned. Not one person said, "That's enough." Ashley noticed. Her smile widened. "Well," she said, "I don't have all day." There are moments in life when time compresses, when 1,000 thoughts crash into your mind at once, but your body chooses before your brain finishes arguing. I thought about objecting, about asking for a manager, about saying her name out loud so others would hear it and remember it. I also thought about how easily people look away, so I nodded. Slowly, deliberately, I set my bag down. I pulled the hem of my shirt over my head. The air felt cold against my skin. The fabric was still clean, still smelled faintly of detergent and morning perfume. I knelt. The coffee soaked into the cotton almost immediately, turning it dark and heavy. My hands moved in steady circles, wiping the floor while my pulse hammered in my ears. I could feel eyes on my back. I could feel the weight of the moment settling into memory. Ashley watched, arms crossed, satisfied. "See?" she said. "Not so hard." When the floor was clean, I stood up. I folded the ruined shirt once, neatly, and held it in my hands. Ashley had already turned away. The silence returned, thicker now, heavier. No one clapped. No one apologized. No one met my eyes. As I walked back to my desk in silence, one thought repeated itself over and over, calm and clear beneath the humiliation. This wasn't about coffee, and it wasn't over. The strangest part wasn't the humiliation, it was what came after. I walked back to my desk holding my ruined shirt like evidence from a crime no one wanted to investigate. The fabric was cold and damp, the coffee smell stronger now, sour and clinging. Every step felt louder than it should have, even though my shoes barely made a sound against the carpet. No one spoke. That silence followed me, stretching from the corridor to my desk, wrapping itself around every cubicle like a warning sign. It wasn't shock. Shock is loud in its own way. This was something else. Practiced, familiar, comfortable. People looked away with impressive precision. One woman adjusted her glasses and began typing with exaggerated focus. A man pretended to be deeply invested in a spreadsheet, scrolling even though the content clearly wasn't changing. Someone laughed quietly at something on their phone, the sound cutting through the air like a nervous tick. I sat down. My hands were steady. That surprised me. Inside, everything felt sharp and alert, like my body had decided fear was inefficient and switched to observation instead. Ashley's voice floated through the office. "Honestly," she said to someone near the supply closet, not even bothering to lower her tone. "Some people just think they're above basic rules. If you make a mess, you clean it. Simple." A few quiet chuckles answered her. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I could picture her perfectly, leaning casually against the counter, badge swinging, confidence radiating from her like she'd earned it instead of stolen it. She walked past my desk a minute later, slow, deliberate. She glanced at me, then at the folded shirt on the edge of my desk. "Next time," she said lightly, "be more careful." Then she smiled. It wasn't cruel in the obvious way. That was what made it worse. It was the smile of someone who felt untouchable, someone who believed the room itself was on her side. And the room was. I waited. I don't know for what. Maybe for someone to clear their throat and say her name sharply. Maybe for a manager to appear. Maybe for an awkward apology, whispered but sincere. Nothing happened. Minutes passed. The office noise slowly returned, but something had changed. It wasn't relief. It was resignation. That's when I understood. This wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't Ashley having a bad day or crossing a line she didn't realize existed. This was a performance she'd given before. The confidence, the timing, the way she scanned the room before speaking, she knew exactly how far she could go, and everyone else knew it too. I opened my laptop and pretended to work. Emails blurred together. Words appeared on the screen without meaning. All my attention was elsewhere, tracking movement, tone, posture. Ashley stopped by 2 desks down and corrected a man old enough to be her father. "No, no," she said, tapping his monitor with her finger. "That's not how we do it. Didn't anyone train you?" He nodded. "Right. Sorry." She moved on. No one challenged her authority because no one had officially given her any. That was the trick. Power without title is harder to confront. There's no rulebook entry for it, no clear chain of command to appeal to. It survives on silence. I leaned back slightly and looked around the room. This office wasn't weak. These people weren't stupid. I could see competence everywhere. Efficient systems, quiet expertise, years of experience tucked behind neutral expressions. But there was also fear. Not dramatic fear. Small fear. The kind that accumulates over time until it feels safer to endure than to resist. Ashley laughed again somewhere behind me. I caught fragments of conversation. She's intense, but you get used to it. Better not to argue. She's close to management, I think. Rumors, assumptions, justifications. I closed my laptop. In that moment, something settled inside me. Not anger, not embarrassment, but clarity. Clear enough to cut. This place had a hierarchy no org chart showed, and Ashley believed she was standing near the top. She had mistaken my silence for weakness, my compliance for submission. She thought she'd learned everything she needed to know about me in the space of a spilled cup of coffee. She was wrong. Very wrong. And as I folded my damaged shirt once more and placed it carefully into my bag, I made myself a promise. I would remember every detail of this room. Every face that looked away. Every second of silence. Because silence, I was beginning to realize, was the loudest evidence of all. If someone had asked me that morning who I was, I would have given the simplest answer. Emily. Just Emily. That was the name on the temporary badge clipped to my bag. No title, no department listed, no indication of seniority. It was intentional, clean, neutral, forgettable. That was the point. I'd been sitting at my desk for less than an hour when the memory of my real arrival returned to me. Not the physical one through the glass doors, but the decision that had brought me here in the first place. 3 weeks earlier, I'd been standing in a completely different office, 40 floors up, quiet carpet, real coffee. The kind of silence that comes with authority, not fear. Headquarters. The boardroom table had been long, polished, intimidating by design. I remembered the way the city looked through the windows behind the executives, distant, orderly, almost unreal. You don't need a title, Martin had said, fingers steepled in front of him. In fact, it's better if you don't have one. I'd nodded. I already knew that. We've received complaints, another voice added. Not formal ones. Nothing that goes through HR, just patterns. Patterns were always worse than incidents. Departments where turnover was inexplicably high. Exit interviews full of vague language, culture issues, lack of support, communication problems. Anonymous feedback forms that said a lot without saying anything concrete. Fear never writes clearly. We need the truth, Martin continued. Not what managers say during audits, not what looks good on paper. We need to know how people are actually treated. That was when he'd looked directly at me. You're good at seeing what others miss, Emily, and people underestimate you. I hadn't smiled. That wasn't a compliment. It was a tool. So I accepted. No announcement, no introduction, no protection, just observation. I was instructed to blend in, to take notes quietly, to listen more than I spoke, to watch how power moved when no one thought they were being watched, especially when it was abused by people who believed they were invisible. Back in the present, I opened the notebook I kept hidden inside a plain black folder. The pages were already filled with small, precise handwriting, dates, names, times, behavioral patterns. I wrote one more line. Ashley, cleaning intern. Displays authority without mandate. Uses humiliation publicly. No intervention from staff. I paused, pen hovering. Then I added, possible normalization of abuse. Investigate further. The irony wasn't lost on me. The person who had just ordered me to strip and scrub the floor had unknowingly handed me exactly what I needed. Proof. Not the dramatic kind, not shouting or threats. Just quiet cruelty, delivered with confidence and rewarded with silence. That's how systems rot. I looked up. Ashley was leaning against a desk again, laughing with two employees. Her posture was relaxed, comfortable. She belonged here, or at least she believed she did. People deferred to her without thinking, made space when she passed, apologized preemptively. She hadn't earned that power. She'd taken it, and no one had stopped her. I thought back to the moment on the floor, my knees against the cold tile, coffee soaking into fabric. The humiliation hadn't been the hardest part. The hardest part was knowing exactly why I was letting it happen. Because to see the truth, sometimes you have to let people show you who they really are. I didn't correct Ashley when she spoke out of line later that day. I didn't challenge her when she interrupted a meeting she had no reason to attend. I didn't flinch when she referred to me as the coffee girl while explaining a process she barely understood. I watched, I listened, and I learned. By the end of the day, I knew more about this department than any report could have told me. I knew who avoided conflict, who enabled it, who suffered quietly, who benefited. Most importantly, I knew this. Ashley wasn't the problem. She was a symptom. And symptoms only exist because something deeper is already broken. As I packed my things to leave that evening, someone finally spoke to me. A woman from accounting, late 30s, tired eyes. She hesitated, then leaned closer and whispered, "I'm sorry about earlier." I met her gaze. "Why didn't you say anything?" She swallowed. "Because it's easier not to." I nodded. I thanked her. I meant it. As I walked out of the office, I felt calm. This assignment wasn't going to be quick or gentle, but it was going to be honest. And when the truth finally surfaced, it wouldn't be loud. It would be undeniable. By the end of the week, Ashley no longer checked who was listening. She didn't need to. Her confidence expanded the way mold does, quietly, invisibly at first, then suddenly everywhere. It spread through tone and posture, through the way she entered rooms without knocking and spoke without being asked. She stopped acting like an intern and started acting like an authority, and no one corrected her. On Monday, she interrupted a team briefing to complain about how someone had left crumbs on a desk. On Tuesday, she reassigned cleaning schedules without consulting her supervisor, a man who had worked here for over a decade and now nodded at her like a subordinate. On Wednesday, she corrected a project manager mid-sentence during a cross-department call. "You're wrong," she said bluntly, leaning over the back of his chair. "That's not how it works here." No one asked how she knew. No one challenged her. I watched it all from my desk, my presence still undefined, still unthreatening. I spoke rarely, and when I did, I kept my voice neutral, forgettable, safe. Ashley stopped seeing me as a person entirely. She referred to me in the third person while I was sitting right there. "Tell her to move," she said once, gesturing vaguely in my direction. "She shouldn't be sitting there. She doesn't understand how things work yet." Yet, as if time alone would teach me my place. I noticed something important then. Ashley's confidence wasn't rooted in competence. It was rooted in reaction, or rather, the lack of it. Every time she crossed a line and nothing happened, her posture straightened a little more. Her voice grew louder, her instructions sharper. Silence rewarded her better than praise ever could. She tested boundaries the way children do, pushing until someone says stop. No one did. I started documenting more carefully. Not just what she said, but how people responded. Who laughed nervously? Who froze? Who complied immediately? Patterns emerged quickly. Ashley targeted people who wouldn't push back. New hires, contractors, temporary staff, anyone without visible protection. She never spoke that way to senior managers, never raised her voice to someone with clear authority. She knew exactly where the line was, and stayed just far enough from it to avoid consequences. That kind of instinct isn't accidental. One afternoon, she stopped by my desk again. She glanced at my screen, unimpressed. "You're doing that wrong." I looked up slowly. "Am I?" "Yes." She tapped the desk. "That report format is outdated." "It's the template provided by headquarters," I replied calmly. She laughed. "This isn't headquarters. Things are different here." There it was, the unspoken rule. "Here, we do what Ashley says." She leaned closer. "You should listen more. People like you don't last long if they don't adapt." I met her eyes for a second longer than necessary. "People like me?" I asked. She shrugged. "Quiet. Soft. You know." Then she walked away, satisfied she'd placed me neatly where she thought I belonged. I wrote another note that evening. Subject displays strategic intimidation, understands hierarchy, exploits ambiguity. I also wrote something else, something more personal. Believes environment protects her. That belief was her strength. It would also be her downfall. By Thursday, people had started coming to her for approval, not because they had to, but because it felt safer than guessing. She began assigning tasks that weren't hers to assign. She spoke in meetings she wasn't invited to. She sat in chairs meant for managers and no one asked her to move. Power doesn't announce itself. It waits to be accepted. And this office had accepted Ashley. On Friday afternoon, an internal email went out. All hands meeting, Monday, 9 a.m., mandatory attendance. I saw Ashley read it over someone's shoulder. Her smile was immediate. "Oh," she said. "That'll be interesting." She glanced around the room like an actress preparing for a spotlight. I closed my notebook. Ashley thought the stage was finally being set for her. She had no idea it already was, just not in the way she imagined. The email changed the temperature of the office. It arrived without explanation, without agenda, without names attached. Just a subject line, clean and neutral, and a single sentence beneath it announcing an all-hands meeting. Mandatory. No exceptions. People reacted before they thought. Screens were minimized too quickly. Chairs shifted. Someone exhaled a quiet, "Finally," while someone else muttered, "That can't be good." The office buzzed with a restrained energy, the kind that comes from uncertainty rather than excitement. Ashley read the message twice. I saw it in the way her smile sharpened, not widened. This wasn't surprise. It was anticipation. "Well?" she said loudly, spinning her chair to face the nearest desks. "Looks like things are about to change." No one asked what she meant. They didn't have to. Rumors began forming within minutes, sliding across desks and between cubicles like invisible notes. A restructure, a budget cut, a surprise visit from headquarters, someone getting fired, someone getting promoted. Ashley fed those rumors with care. "I heard they're finally fixing the leadership gap," she said at lunch, stirring her drink even though it was already empty. "Management's been unhappy for a while," she added later, casually, as if letting something slip. "They don't call these meetings unless something big is happening." Every sentence placed her closer to the center of the story she was telling. She arrived earlier than usual on Monday. So did I. The conference room doors were still closed when we got there, lights off inside, the long glass walls reflecting our shapes back at us. Chairs were arranged in neat rows, all facing the small podium at the front. The company logo glowed faintly on the screen behind it. Ashley walked in like she owned the space. She chose a seat in the front row, directly in the center. She set her bag down carefully, straightened the chair, and crossed her legs with deliberate confidence. She looked around, assessing who was watching. I sat down beside her. Not directly next to her, that would have felt intentional, but close enough that there was no mistaking it. Closer than anyone else. She glanced at me briefly, then looked away, unimpressed. "You should probably sit further back," she said, not unkindly, as if offering advice. "These seats are usually for management." "I know," I replied. She smiled, assuming I meant someday. The room began to fill. People entered quietly, choosing seats along the sides or near the back. Some avoided the front entirely, as if proximity to the podium carried risk. A few glanced at Ashley, hesitated, then chose seats elsewhere. She noticed. Of course she did. Her posture straightened even more. Whispers floated through the room. "Do you think it's about the complaints?" "I heard someone from HQ is coming." "They wouldn't do that without warning, would they?" I kept my eyes forward. This was the moment where perception mattered most. Where truth was already decided in people's minds, waiting only for confirmation. Ashley leaned slightly toward me. "You seem calm," she said. "Aren't you nervous?" "No," I answered honestly. She laughed. "You should be. These meetings don't end well for everyone." The lights dimmed slightly. The door at the side of the room opened. The director stepped in first, followed by two members of senior management. Conversations died instantly. Chairs straightened, phones disappeared. The director scanned the room, and then his gaze settled on me. Not briefly, not accidentally. He nodded. Just once. Ashley didn't see it. She was too busy smiling toward the podium, already imagining herself being acknowledged, recognized, elevated. She smoothed her hair, adjusted her badge, and crossed her legs the other way. The room went completely still. "This meeting will begin in a moment," the director said. "Thank you all for being on time." I felt the weight of the folded shirt still in my bag. The coffee stain, long dried now. The memory of cold tile and silence. Ashley leaned back in her chair, confident, relaxed. She believed she knew how this story ended. So did I. The difference was this. Only one of us had read the whole script. Waiting reveals more than action ever does. As the director stepped aside and the senior managers took their seats near the podium, the room settled into an uneasy stillness. The kind where people stop breathing fully, where every small sound feels amplified. The hum of the projector, the faint buzz of fluorescent lights, the creak of a chair shifting under someone's weight. No one spoke. Ashley tapped her foot once, then stilled it, aware she was being watched. She folded her hands neatly in her lap, chin raised, the picture of composed confidence. From the outside, she looked ready. Inside, though, I could sense it. The subtle tension in her shoulders, the way her eyes flicked too often toward the door, as if expecting someone important to arrive and validate her expectations. The director cleared his throat. "We'll begin shortly," he said again, slower this time. No explanation followed. That was deliberate. Silence stretched. Seconds turned into long, uncomfortable minutes, the kind of pause that makes people question themselves, that makes assumptions wobble. Someone behind us whispered, "Are we waiting for someone?" No answer. Ashley leaned toward me again, her voice low. "They're late," she said. "Probably the new manager." I said nothing. Her confidence didn't falter, but it adjusted, like someone shifting in a chair that suddenly feels less stable than expected. I watched the room instead. I watched the people who had looked away when I knelt on the floor. I watched the ones who had laughed quietly, the ones who had stayed frozen, the ones who had whispered apologies afterward. Their faces were different now. More alert, more exposed. This was what uncertainty did. It stripped people of rehearsed behavior. The door opened again. Everyone turned. A man stepped in, late 40s, impeccably dressed, calm in a way that suggested he didn't rush for anyone. He exchanged a brief word with the director, handed him a folder, and took a seat to the side. Ashley's smile returned, brighter now. "That's him," she whispered. "Has to be." She straightened fully, smoothing her skirt again, posture flawless. I could almost feel her rehearsing what she would say if called on, how she would frame herself, how she would explain her initiative, her leadership, her commitment to standards. People like Ashley always had a narrative ready. The director opened the folder slowly. He didn't speak right away. He looked at the pages, then at the room, then, once more, directly at me. This time, his gaze lingered. A ripple of confusion passed through the front row. I felt it physically, like a subtle shift in air pressure. A few people noticed. Heads tilted. Eyes followed his line of sight. Ashley noticed too. She glanced at me, frowning slightly, then looked back at the director, assuming it was a coincidence. It wasn't. "We've spent the last few weeks reviewing this department," the director began. "Not just performance metrics, not just outcomes." He paused. "But behavior." The word landed heavily. I saw Ashley's jaw tighten, just a fraction. "This review wasn't announced," he continued, "because announced reviews change behavior, and we weren't interested in performances." A murmur ran through the room. Ashley stopped smiling. "We wanted to see how people act when they believe no one important is watching." The silence became absolute. I felt my pulse slow, not speed up. This was the moment where everything aligned: the humiliation, the notes, the waiting. Ashley's foot started tapping again. She crossed and uncrossed her legs, then stilled herself, clearly irritated by the movement. Her confidence was still there, but now it was working harder. The director closed the folder. "There's one more thing before we continue," he said. "We've been waiting for the right person to speak first." Ashley inhaled, preparing. The director didn't look at her. He turned to me. "Emily," he said calmly, "whenever you're ready." The room froze. Ashley's head snapped toward me so fast I heard the faint rustle of her hair. Her eyes widened, and for the first time since I'd met her, she didn't look confident at all. There are moments when a room inhales all at once. This was one of them. When the director said my name, it wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. He didn't raise his voice or gesture toward me. He simply said it the way you say something that has already been decided. "Emily." Every head turned. I felt the collective weight of the room land on my shoulders, heavy and curious and suddenly uncomfortable. Chairs creaked as people shifted. Someone near the back whispered, "Who?" Ashley stared at me, not with confusion anymore, with alarm. Her eyes moved quickly, scanning my face, my posture, my clothes, as if trying to reconcile the image she had built of me with the one now sitting beside her. Her confidence didn't vanish instantly. It cracked. "Whenever you're ready," the director repeated. I stood up. The sound of my chair sliding back seemed louder than it should have been. I smoothed my skirt, not because I was nervous, but because habits are hard to break. I took one step forward, then another, until I was standing slightly ahead of the front row. I didn't rush. That, I noticed, unsettled people more than anything else. "My name is Emily Carter," I said. The name carried differently in the room now. It wasn't just a sound anymore. It was a key. I saw recognition flicker across a few faces, the ones who had been here long enough to know what that name meant when paired with headquarters. "I joined this department 3 weeks ago," I continued, my voice steady, clear. "Not as a manager, not as an executive, and not as an observer you were informed about." A ripple passed through the room. Ashley swallowed. "I was sent by headquarters to understand how this department truly operates," I said. Not on paper, not in reports, but in reality. I paused. Silence pressed in again, thick and unavoidable. My instructions were simple, I went on. Listen. Watch. Don't interfere. Let people behave the way they normally do when they believe no one important is watching. I could feel eyes burning into me now. Some curious, some uneasy, some already defensive. And what I saw, I said, was not a problem with performance. I turned slightly, letting my gaze move across the room. Slowly, deliberately. It was a problem with power. Ashley's hands clenched in her lap. I took a breath. Not to steady myself, I was steady, but to give the moment space. People needed time to realize what was happening to them. This department doesn't lack talent, I continued. It doesn't lack intelligence or effort. What it lacks is accountability. The director stepped back slightly, giving me the floor fully now. There are people here who work beyond their roles, I said, who take initiative without authority, who correct, command, and humiliate others without consequence. I turned toward Ashley, not dramatically, not angrily, just directly. Ashley's face drained of color. There is an intern, I said calmly, who believes she has the right to order employees to remove their clothing and clean floors in front of their colleagues. Gasps rippled through the room. Ashley jerked forward in her seat. That's not... I raised a hand. I'm not finished, I said, still calm. I reached into my bag and pulled out the folded shirt. The coffee stain was still there, dark and unmistakable. This happened on my first day, I said, in full view of this department. I looked around. No one intervened. The silence that followed was heavier than anything before it. Ashley stood up abruptly. She spilled coffee, she said, her voice too loud, too fast. She was being careless. I was just enforcing basic rules. I turned to her. Are you responsible for enforcing rules? I asked. She hesitated. Just a fraction. I was just doing my job. What is your job title? I asked. She opened her mouth, closed it. I'm a cleaning intern, she said finally, her voice smaller now. I nodded. Thank you. I turned back to the room. This isn't about one person, I said. It's about an environment that allowed this to happen. An environment where silence became permission. I let that sit. Then I said the words Ashley hadn't heard yet. The words that changed the shape of the room entirely. As of this morning, I said, I am the new department manager. The room erupted, not in noise, but in movement. People shifted, whispered, stared openly now. Some looked relieved. Others looked terrified. Ashley sank back into her chair. She was sitting closer to me than anyone else, and for the first time since that spilled coffee, I saw it in her eyes clearly. Not arrogance. Fear. I didn't sit down. I stayed standing at the front of the room, the stained shirt folded over my arm like a quiet reminder. The projector hummed behind me, frozen on the company logo, indifferent to the tension spreading through the air. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I want to be very clear about what happened, I said, because clarity is the difference between accountability and chaos. I turned slightly so everyone could see me, not just the front row, not just Ashley. On my first morning here, I accidentally spilled coffee on the floor, I said. It was a minor incident, one that happens every day in every office. A few people nodded, almost involuntarily. A cleaning intern approached me, I continued. She did not offer assistance. She did not ask if I was okay. She did not follow any documented procedure. Ashley's breathing was shallow now. I could hear it from where I stood. Instead, I said, she ordered me to remove my shirt and use it to clean the floor. Publicly. The word publicly echoed. I looked around the room again. This order was given loudly, confidently, in front of multiple witnesses. I paused. No one objected. That was the sentence that hurt the room the most. I could see it land on faces, on the woman from accounting, on the man Ashley had corrected earlier in the week, on the manager who had pretended not to hear anything at all. "This is not a story," I said. "It is an incident." I turned to the director and nodded slightly. He opened the folder and slid a remote across the table. The screen behind me changed. Security footage. The angle was high, slightly distorted but clear enough. The spill. Ashley rushing over, her posture, her gestures, me kneeling, the shirt in my hands. The room watched itself. No commentary, no sound, just truth, played back without emotion. Ashley stood up again. "This is ridiculous," she said, her voice cracking. "You're twisting things." I was under pressure. I was just trying to keep order. I turned to her. "Order for whom?" I asked. She faltered. "For the office." "By humiliating one person?" I asked. "By exploiting your position as someone people were afraid to contradict?" She shook her head. "That's not fair." I stepped closer to the front row, but I didn't invade her space. I didn't need to. "Tell me," I said calmly, "have you ever spoken to a senior manager this way?" Ashley looked down. "Have you ever ordered them to clean a floor?" I asked. Silence. "Have you ever humiliated someone who had the power to challenge you?" She said nothing. The answer was already in the room. I turned back to everyone else. "This behavior didn't happen in a vacuum," I said. "It happened because it was rewarded, because silence told her it was acceptable, because no one believed it was their place to intervene." The director stepped forward. "We've reviewed additional footage," he said, "and multiple reports." Ashley's head snapped up. "Reports?" "Anonymous ones," he said calmly. "Consistent ones." Her shoulders slumped. I looked at her one last time, not with anger, not with satisfaction, with finality. "I'm not interested in punishment for its own sake," I said. "I'm interested in correction." I folded the shirt carefully and placed it on the table beside the director. "So I'll ask one question," I said, my voice steady, carrying through the room. "Is this how we treat people in this company?" No one answered. They didn't need to. The footage ended. The screen went black. And in that darkness, the decision was already made. Silence doesn't always mean confusion. Sometimes it means resolution. The screen behind me remained black, reflecting the room back onto itself. Rows of faces suspended between shock and understanding. No one spoke. No one needed to. The story had finished telling itself. Ashley was still standing. She looked smaller now. Not physically, but structurally. Like something essential inside her had collapsed, and the rest was still pretending to hold. "I can explain," she said suddenly. The words rushed out, tripping over one another. "I didn't mean it like that. People exaggerate. It was a joke. She misunderstood. I was stressed. I was told to be strict. I thought." She stopped, because she realized she was telling a different story every few seconds. The director didn't interrupt her. Neither did I. We let the contradictions pile up, one on top of the other, until even she seemed to notice them. "I mean, I didn't order her," Ashley continued, voice rising. "I suggested it, and she didn't say no. If she felt uncomfortable, she should have spoken up." I tilted my head slightly. "Do you believe consent exists when power is implied?" She blinked. "What? Do you believe people feel free to refuse when they think there will be consequences?" I asked calmly. Ashley looked around the room. For the first time, no one looked away. She tried again, desperation creeping in. "Everyone knows interns don't have real authority. This is being blown out of proportion." The director finally spoke. Authority doesn't come from job titles alone, he said evenly. It comes from environment, from patterns, from what behavior is tolerated. He flipped another page in the folder. We reviewed 6 weeks of footage, he continued. We also reviewed internal communications, informal complaints, exit interview notes. Ashley's hands trembled. There were no formal reports, she said weakly. Because people didn't feel safe making them, I replied. That's part of the problem. The director nodded. That fear reflects a failure of leadership. Ashley seized on that. Exactly. Leadership failed. Not me. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I looked around the room once more. This isn't a courtroom, I said quietly. No one is on trial here. Ashley looked hopeful for half a second. This is an evaluation, I continued. And evaluations have outcomes. The director closed the folder. Effective immediately, he said. Ashley's internship is terminated. The words landed cleanly. No anger, no drama, just finality. Ashley inhaled sharply. You can't. I can, he said. And I have. Her face flushed. This is unfair. You're making an example out of me. I met her eyes. No, I said. You made yourself one? Security appeared at the door. Not aggressively, not urgently, just present, procedural. Ashley's voice broke. This is ridiculous. Everyone does this. You just chose me. No one defended her. Not one person. That hurt her more than anything else. She grabbed her bag with shaking hands, standing frozen for a moment as if waiting for someone, anyone, to intervene. No one did. As she was escorted out, the room stayed silent. Not relieved, not celebratory, reflective. When the door closed behind her, I exhaled slowly. This doesn't end here, I said to the room. Removing one person doesn't fix a culture. People listened now, really listened. There will be changes, I continued. Clear reporting channels, protected escalation, accountability at every level, including mine. I paused. And there will be one expectation moving forward. I looked at them. If you see something wrong, you speak. Silence is no longer an option. The director nodded once, approving. The meeting adjourned quietly. No applause, no whispers. Just people standing up, gathering their things, carrying the weight of what they'd just witnessed, and what they now understood they were responsible for. As I walked out of the conference room, the folded shirt still on the table behind me, I knew one thing with certainty. This office would never be the same, and neither would they. I wore the same shirt the next morning. Not the stained one. That was gone now, sealed in a plastic evidence bag and logged with everything else. But the same style, the same color. Simple, unremarkable. The kind of shirt no one had noticed until it was used against me. This time, everyone noticed. The office was already awake when I arrived. Earlier than usual, quieter than before. Conversations lowered as I passed. Chairs shifted. People straightened instinctively, like they were recalibrating their sense of gravity. Someone held the door for me. Someone else said, "Good morning, Emily," and meant it. I nodded, returned the greeting, and kept walking. The floor near the conference rooms gleamed. Too clean. Overcorrected. I recognized the impulse immediately. When systems change, people clean what they can see first. I stopped for coffee at the machine. The same one. I filled my cup carefully this time, not because I was afraid of spilling, but because habits linger. The machine hummed. The smell was familiar. Grounding. I carried the cup across the office. No one watched. That, more than anything, told me things had shifted. At my desk, a small envelope waited. No name on it. Inside was a handwritten note. Thank you for saying something when we couldn't. I folded it once and slipped it into my bag. Throughout the day, people spoke differently. Not louder, not bolder, just more honest. Questions were asked instead of assumed. Corrections were given without edge. Authority moved where it belonged, with clarity, not fear. In the afternoon, I passed the spot where the coffee had spilled weeks ago. Nothing marked it. No stain. No memory on the surface. But I remembered. Not the embarrassment. Not the cold tile. The silence. And the moment it broke. Late in the day, the woman from accounting stopped by my office door. She didn't knock. She hesitated, then smiled. "I just wanted to say," she began, "it feels different." "It is," I said. She nodded. "Good." After she left, I sat alone for a moment, watching the office through the glass. People moved with purpose now, not avoidance. The hierarchy was visible again, not oppressive, not theatrical, just real. Power hadn't disappeared. It had been put back in its place. As I shut down my computer and stood to leave, I glanced once more at the polished floor, reflecting the lights above. It was clean. Not because of coffee, but because everything else finally was.